Hello and welcome, I'm the legendary Pokemaster. Today we're talking about something that could have been Pokémon Z. This was a game that had a lot of hints that it was coming out, but never actually did. So hopefully today we'll be able to find out what happened. With that said, without further ado, let's start. So first off, there is going to be that one question right off the bat. But Austin, why would a Pokémon Z ever exist in the first place? Well, it could for a number of reasons. First is the pattern we've seen in most Pokemon generations, even the most recent one, 7. In each, there's always been an enhanced or differently storied remake succeeding the original game of the generation. Red and Blue were succeeded by Yellow in this manner, as were Gold and Silver to Crystal, Ruby and Sapphire to Emerald, Diamond and Pearl to Platinum, Black and White to Black 2 and White 2, and Sun and Moon to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. This leaves Kalos standing out, as the break in the pattern results in the region being the sole one to appear in only a single pair of Pokemon games. Plus, unlike many of its predecessors, Kalos had a lot of potential for enhancement that would have made a Pokemon Z more justified. I'm gonna get back to those factors in a minute. But first I also wanted to note the anime, something I rarely do. Crikey, I found it! When I saw this for the first time, I was like, yeah, Pokemon Z is confirmed. Not only is the name evidence enough that there should have been a Pokemon Z, but this portion of the Kalos anime introduced a bunch of new things, such as Zygarde's alternate forms and the still weaker than protein Ash Greninja. These things went into Sun and Moon instead, which felt kind of off because the Sun and Moon anime makes no mention of this at all. Ash Greninja technically wasn't even in Sun and Moon itself, you had to get it from the demo version that takes up space on the massive 2GB SD card they give you. Point is, all the stuff they did at the end of Kalos' life seemed kinda rushed. And the fact that they made this big huge logo with a Z in it seems to hint that there was supposed to be some sort of enhanced Kalos remake in Gen 6. There was so much to fix in Kalos, to such an extent that I'll even list everything to you. Here you go. As I said, there could have been stuff like Zygarde's alternate forms and Ash Greninja. They could have also added more legendaries though, since there are only 3 Pokemon from Kalos that are legendary. Megas could have been added, clothing selections could have been expanded upon, features of the XYZ anime could have been implemented, story development, character development, the game being easy to beat development, and so on. I'm pretty sure if you've played these games, you're very familiar with what needs to be fixed. So the real question is, why didn't Pokemon Z come along to fix any of it? Well, there are a few explanations, and the first one doesn't really involve the games and story as much as it does capitalism. Nintendo likes to make money. Sometimes by questionable means. And because of this, they probably skipped out on Pokemon Z. By the time Pokemon X, Y, and Z had come around as an anime, the games Pokemon X and Y had already risen to become the best-selling ones on the 3DS. Nintendo, knowing they definitely wouldn't be able to oust this with an enhanced sequel, simply decided to move on. This is backed up by history itself, since typically the original games in a generation outsell their successors by a whopping ratio of about 2 to 1. Meanwhile, whenever a new generation of Pokemon is introduced, it tends to massively outsell the previous generation's enhanced remake. So, I could only assume, Game Freak, and by extension Nintendo, decided to experiment with moving on prematurely, making more sales in the process. Another explanation that could tie in with this involves the graphical difference between Generation 6 and 7. Anyone could say without a doubt that Generation 7 has much higher graphical capabilities than Generation 6, mainly opened up by the power of the new Nintendo 3DS and 2DS. And yes, you can run all of these on the original 3DS, but it's laggy, and it's slow, and requires a restart. If someone got a game like that in 2012, they'd donate it to their local railroad tracks. Game Freak probably realized these new capabilities, and acknowledged what a selling point a game looking like this would be to the public. But you can't really have graphical differences within a generation since it would limit trading, so they instead moved to Generation 7. I'd say that's one of the most likely reasons for their skipping Pokemon Z and instead wedging most of the build-up they had into Sun and Moon. While it may seem evident that the debut of the Nintendo Switch had a hand in it somehow, I say nah. The Nintendo Switch was announced way after Sun and Moon were, and since Pokemon is produced by companies like Game Freak and Creatures Incorporated, they probably wouldn't have known that a new handheld was on the horizon, especially since up to that point the future of the 3DS was looking pretty good. Yes, obviously Pokemon being one of the biggest Nintendo exclusives could have been told way ahead of time, but the chance still seems kinda slim. There's one last theory I would like to consider though, something less major but worthy of consideration nonetheless. In Pokemon Sun and Moon, we saw variations of this thing. It is a Z power ring, and it made its debut there. This thing harnesses Z energy to use Z moves. The thing we're looking at here is the Z though. You know what it looks like? When we consider it, the story behind the Z-Ring could have made quite a bit of sense in Kalos' situation. In Sun and Moon, it's gifted to you by a guardian deity, Tapu Koko, a Pokemon that could easily be replaced with Zygarde, which is also said to be a guardian of sorts. Z-Rings could work in conjunction with Mega Evolution, maybe each Z-move being powered by Zygarde's energy, and only being available when you have a Pokemon that's Mega Evolved. It may seem a little far-fetched, But Ash Greninja seems to make use of what apparently is some sort of aura in the XYZ anime, one that kind of resembles that present in auras of certain Pokemon in Sun and Moon. So, perhaps, Z-Power was intended for Pokemon Z. This could provide a link as to why they didn't go forward with the concept though. Having Z-Power implemented in a new region gave them more freedom. Instead of being limited to a similar storyline as Pokemon X and Y with Z-Power simply added to the mix, the developers could intertwine the concept in a new story, which is precisely what they did in Sun and Moon obviously. They have the Z crystals that you can earn at trials, and they also have a backstory with Necrozma a bit. This, combined with the economical factors that I said, seemed to have killed Pokemon Z. Obviously info on this game is quite elusive though, and a number of stances can be taken on why it didn't come to fruition. So what do you think? Why didn't Pokemon Z happen? Please leave a comment down below. You can also subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. Regardless, I'll be streaming soon, and I will see you in the next video.